We now return to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute, the radio show discussing the honest truth about Illinois policy and politics. Here's AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with Ted Dabrowski, Vice President of Policy at the Illinois Policy Institute. And Ted, on Friday, a bunch of candidates, Republican candidates for state legislative office, signed jointly released a statement that they all signed saying they support the recall legislation that State Representative LaShawn Ford, who's a West Side Democrat, filed. Now, it is, of course, focused on Rahm Emanuel, but it's a recall legislation that would provide a recall mechanism for the mayor of the city of Chicago on a go-forward basis, even were Rahm recalled. And it's interesting to see Republican candidates providing leadership where very few Republican state legislators, incumbents, have signed on. I know Jeannie Ives in the House, Republican from Wheaton, Senator Tim Bivens, a Republican from Dixon, signed on in the Senate. But it's been curious to me why the Republican caucuses in the House and the Senate aren't providing full-throated support for Ford's recall bill. If it's good enough to have a recall statute for the governor, why not for the mayor of Chicago and everybody else?
No, I think you're absolutely right. We don't have a process in place to take care of a situation like a Rahm Emanuel and what's going on, and clearly the state should have one for mayoral candidates or mayors and sitting people in office.
Yeah.
So it's a good idea. Of course, we have to be careful that we don't make it so easy to have recall elections that all we're doing is having recall elections all the time just because somebody doesn't like what's happening. That said, it's interesting that you've got candidates coming up, stepping up and making a case. But I think, probably there's not enough voices, political voices making the case for why, Rahm at least should be challenged. He's certainly, he's ignored the community. CPS is broke. The city's, junk bond.
You've got a majority of Chicago that says he should resign. You've got liberals, leftists, the nation calling for him to resign. Liberal columnists in Milwaukee and across the fruited plains calling for him to resign. You've got this opportunity, frankly, even if we want to talk about politics in a creative manner, you have this opportunity to send a message to minority families in the city of Chicago that you haven't been able to attract if you're a Republican, to say, yeah, we get your concern about injustice, your concern about someone that clearly was lying to you and blocking the release of public information every step of the way because he knew the politics of it would be damaging, particularly the timing of his reelect. And yet Republicans, so afraid of their shadow, they don't want to risk their super minorities in the House and the Senate to do the right thing here and to pretend to perhaps change the balance of power in this state by attracting more minority families to their ranks. It is just baffling to me. One of the candidates that is signed on to the statement that I just mentioned supporting LaShawn Ford's legislation is a Republican candidate for state senate in the Northwest suburbs. He's running to fill the seat vacated by Dan Katowski. He is Mel Thillins. Mel, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me on here.
So why did you and your colleagues decide to do, in kind of concert with one another, what, frankly, the Republican caucuses in the House and the Senate haven't been willing to do?
Well, Dan, everybody's talking about this. This is something that's big news, and it's something we should all be taking a stand on. We're working together with some other principal candidates, and we just think it's time to give the people the power to change the leadership.
Hey, Mel, Ted here. I think Dan asked a great question. Why is it taking candidates like you to stand up for this and not the establishment, the Republican establishment? Is it that people are scared of who would come in place of Rahm Emanuel? Is that what they're fearing? What is the fear?
Well, I'm not quite sure what the fear is, but everybody should be taking a stand on this. This is a big issue. I mean, I'm a small government guy, and I believe that there's no worse government overreach than a government employee killing a citizen and then a mayor working for 13 months to cover it up. And everybody should be taking a stand on that. I call on my opponents to take a stand, and my fellow Republicans who are in the General Assembly to take a stand as well with the candidates that we have going on out here.
Yeah, it's so interesting, the response. And you had this was a topic on Meet the Press last Sunday, a week ago Sunday. And it was very interesting. The New York Times reporter who covers Washington, D.C., basically said of Illinois, look, if you had legislative leaders or the governor call on Rahm to resign, then it would be over. It would essentially open up the floodgates to say it's okay to sign on to this recall legislation and let this process move forward. It seems to me that if this legislation weren't bottled up by Mike Madigan in the House and John Cullerton in the Senate, if it came to a floor vote, then you would have people really in a position where they would be making a vote that could decide their continued presence in elective office. And that's ultimately where we need to get to, is you have to have people in leadership positions exhibit some freaking leadership.
That's right. I mean, we all know what we're talking about. We're talking about the political power structure that's been maintaining the status quo for decades and decades, and this is an attack on that, and it needs to be. It's time that all the people in this state, in this city, get together and say, listen, we've had enough. We've had enough of what they're doing, and we've had enough of them taking advantage of us. And
I think that's the key point, is the power structure. This isn't about litigating any of these individual cases. You have Rahm Emanuel, who's as unpopular among the police as he is within the African-American community, for example, more generally. So, again, the lack of political courage exhibited by Republicans in the superminority, who are in the superminority, in my opinion, in part because they're unwilling to distinguish themselves from the Chicago Democrat power structure, really, makes it difficult to be a Republican in this state.
Well, keep in mind, Dan, don't dismay too much. We still got the right ideas here, and we still need to move forward. Sometimes it just takes other folks a little longer to get it on board.
All right, he is Mel Fillins. He's a candidate for state senate, Republican candidate for state senate in the northwest suburbs. Mel, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it.